first, and Syrians are facing an uncertain future after rebels seized the capital, Damascus, prompting longtime President Bashar al-Assad to flee to Russia. It's the culmination of an 11-day advance by a rebel alliance dominated by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Joyful residents taking to the streets after the announcement of Assad's departure as crowds toured the ousted leader's luxurious home. But as the implication of his downfall begin to quickly ripple across the region, Israel has already begun carrying out airstrikes on what they call strategic weapons systems inside Syria, saying that a ground troop operation on Syrian territory was a limited and temporary step. And this, as the Kremlin says, it's been Vladimir Putin's personal decision to grant asylum to Assad and his family. France 24's James Andre has reached Damascus, and this is what he told us earlier.
Well, I'm at the centre of Damascus. As you can hear behind me, there is celebratory gunfire. This monument is a symbol both of the city but also of Assad's rule, father and son. This old tank here was obviously part of the army of Bashar al-Assad. Now people are celebrating on it. As you can see, this of course is an important and historic moment for all Syrians around the world.
And joining me now is France 24's terrorism specialist Wassim Nasr. Wassim, there are a number of foreign fighters in Syria. What are they doing at this point in time?
Well, actually, you're right. There's a number of foreign fighters in Syria and of kids who grew up in Syria and became fighters. They are actually into the combat. HTS sent them to fight on many fronts, but they are really monitored and controlled by some subgroups that abide by the rules of HTS, because Muhammad al-Julani, those jihadis or foreign fighters who did not accept to abide by his rule were even kicked out of Idlib, either imprisoned or killed since maybe 4 or 5 years. We have to remember also, for example, that it is the fighters of HTS that killed the 4th Caliph of the Islamic State last year. And we also have to know that the prisons of HTS are full of Al-Qaeda or Islamic State sympathizers, and the number 2 of HTS was killed by the Islamic State suicide bomber at the beginning of the year. I got exclusive footage of the French fighters who are on the front of Hama, and we can see them maybe on the screen. And so they were based in Idlib, and they were sent by HTS to the fronts of Hama, and we might maybe see the footage. Here it is. So this is a drone footage of French fighters. Not all of them are French. Among those fighters, we have less than 10 French fighters, and this is a BMP that they took from the army. And we can listen.
So when was this footage taken?
This was 3 days ago. So this is Hama city. And we have another footage here. And here they are destroying a statue of Hafiz al-Assad in Alawi town. And the most impressive footage is this one. It's a Christian town. And you are hearing French jihadis.
You can hear the French being spoken there.
You can hear the French, and he is saying even the Christians are celebrating the downfall of Assad. This was Sunday. This was yesterday.
And exactly where is this again?
This is a town south of Hama. And here a footage of Ansar al-Tawheed, which is a group where French fighters are incorporated, as we were speaking. And here what's interesting to see, the green are the rebel fighters or Islamist fighters, and the red are the Syrian army. And this contradicts reports that the Syrian army did not at all put up a fight. Those are the fronts south of Hama, between Hama and Homs actually. And as we see the violence of the fighting, we see that actually the Syrian army tried to put up a fight. They tried to put up a fight at least in the areas where they had a minimum support. They did not fight in the fronts of west of Aleppo and of Idlib and the fronts of Idlib, because the towns were ghost towns actually, and people were going back to their homes.
But they also didn't have any air cover because the Russians weren't there to help.
They had a little air cover from their own army and from the Russians, but it's a very good remark, because in 2015, when the Russians went in to back the Syrian army, they had almost 40 fighter jets in Syria. Today, they had less than 10, with the very big problem of ammunition because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. And so Julani and HTS uses foreign fighters on critical operations and on very hard fronts, but they are not free to roam as they wish or to operate as they wish, as we saw before at the beginning of the civil war. So this is one of the biggest challenges that HTS and Julani had and will have in the future, is monitoring the foreign fighters.
And monitoring their activity very closely, because not everybody else has signed up to his group. Now, the big issue is governance, and both the UK and US have indicated that they are starting to look at taking HTS off the terrorism list. Do you think this is going to happen?
I think it could happen, because Julani and HTS showed at many times that they are out of international jihad. When I met Julani in Idlib a year ago, he was very clear. He was clear about global jihad, which was a mistake, as he said, and global terrorism was a mistake, and that they were concentrating on fighting Assad, which they toppled at the end of the day, the Iranians and the Russians. And we should remember also that Julani himself ignited the war between the Islamic State and al-Qaeda that started in 2013 in Syria and today is all over the globe. We should know also, as we said at the beginning of a discussion, that Julani is repressing al-Qaeda sympathizers, and he prevented al-Qaeda from having a foothold in Syria with a subgroup called al-Assad. So, yes, regarding this and regarding what he did as governance in Idlib, we can imagine it could happen. And what I saw in Idlib, we're going to see it, one of the biggest challenges of governance he has, and we have to show you footage from Ariha, which is a town that was bombed by the Syrian army yet the day before the beginning of the military operation. And what is interesting in this footage is that everything we see, all the buildings that we see actually are empty, and the inhabitants live in tents next to the buildings because they don't want to leave their town. And this town was bombed on daily basis by the Russians and by the Syrian army. And one of the biggest problems of governance and the challenges that they have is those displaced people. And we're going to see another footage, if you permit me. It is the Atmi displaced camp. We are talking only about Syrians here, 1.5 million. This is footage I filmed myself last year. And Julani had to find a solution for those people with the help of the international community and the United Nations. So answering also your question, they could be delisted for this.
Indeed. Wassim, we're going to have to leave it there, but it's very interesting what you're saying about Julani, because I imagine there are a lot of people who want to know more about this charismatic 42-year-old who's managed to pull off what he has done, keeping in mind that he was a very conservative leader in Idlib, and also the role of women will be interesting in a future Syrian society.